Hello, old gun guy here. Doing this first video on basic gun terms or nomenclature, a real fancy word for the naming of parts for a firearm. It gets confusing, especially if brand new. You just acquired a handgun or a rifle. You might have inherited it, and a relative passed away, and you inherited this firearm. What am I doing with it? Well, safety first. All firearms are tools, but they can be a very dangerous tool in the uninitiated's hands. I keep things simple. If you remember these two rules, the other rules will fall into place as you progress along. Firearm is always loaded. Treat it as always loaded. And rule number 2, do not point the gun at anything you don't want to kill or destroy, or do not let the muzzle of the firearm cover anything you don't want to kill or destroy. Obviously, if you're in a target range and you're going to put holes in paper, then yes, you point the firearm at the target, but don't point it at the dog, the ceiling, your foot. Remember that simple rule, you really won't go wrong. That said, let's go over basic terms or parts of a firearm. I have a Glock 23 here. It's just simple to illustrate. Very basic terms. This is not for someone who's handled firearms before. This is the muzzle. This is where the projectiles exit the firearm. All right. In here, I don't know if it'll come up on camera, is the chamber or the breech of the firearm. It's being a semi-automatic firearm, and I'll go into that in a minute what that means. This large black part is the slide. It's also could be called a breech block. It seals the chamber when there's a round of ammunition in there. Semi-automatic firearms feed from a magazine. It holds cartridges. The magazine on this firearm goes in the grip. In most firearms, when talking about semi-automatic rifles, different matter. Some do, some don't. There's such a wide array of firearms, but we need to get the basic terms down. Obviously, this is your trigger. This has very few controls. A Glock basically has a slide lock, slide release here, button on the side. If I depress it, the slide will go forward and close it on the chamber. All right. Before you handle any firearms, obviously, you should. There's no live ammunition anywhere on this table or anywhere on this floor of this house. Actually, these firearms have been all cleared by me before I even started this video. But that's it on the semi-automatic. How this firearm works. It's clear. You have a cartridge. This is a 45 Colt. I use this because it's easy to see on camera, large size. It's made of brass. It holds the components of the cartridge: the primer, the propellant, and the projectile. And the brass case does a second duty. It's a high pressure gas seal. So basically what happens with this or any firearm, you chamber around, it's stripped from the magazine under spring pressure. There's a big spring in here. I'll pull this gun apart real quick and I'll show you this. The round enters the chamber. This is the chamber, part of the barrel. All right, it sits in there. There's a mechanism to strike the primer, which initiates the cartridge igniting and generating vast volumes of gas and pressure and propelling the projectile out the barrel. This particular firearm doesn't have a hammer that would strike a pin. It has a striker. The striker is a spring-loaded firing pin internally in the gun. When you compress the trigger, if there's a loaded round of ammunition here, what will happen is the striker will release at some point, strike the cartridge. The primer will ignite the propellant. The propellant will generate pressure. This is 40 Smith & Wesson. This particular firearm. It operates about 35,000 pounds per square inch, and that's what the pressure will be generated inside this barrel. That's a lot of pressure. Your car tires hold about 32 pounds per square inch, so 1,000 times more, over 1,000 times more. The projectile will enter the barrel. All handguns and rifles are rifled. I'll explain that in a minute. The projectile will go down the barrel. It will engage. There's spiral cut grooves inside the barrel, helical grooves that impart spin to the projectile, stabilize it. Projectiles, it goes down the barrel, the pressure starts dropping. It's the Boyle's law. As volume increases, pressure decreases. So it starts out at 32,000 psi peak chamber pressure, and then it comes down to the muzzle, and the bullet exits, and you hear the loud bang, and that's 5,000 or 6,000 psi of gas pressure releasing. That's what makes all that noise. The projectile goes down range to its target. As this is a fairly powerful cartridge for a handgun cartridge, or 9mm, or any of the other than a pocket cartridge, I'm going to insert this rod in the barrel. There's a delay. When the cartridge pushes back against the breech face, the barrel and the slide are locked together until they hit there's a ramp in the frame that unlocks the barrel. The physics, inertia, will drive the slide back against spring pressure till it hits a stop, and then return forward, stripping another cartridge and getting ready to load another round. You can fire another round. It's called a semi-automatic pistol. One trigger pull, one shot. These are very safe firearms. If you don't pull the trigger, the firearm won't go off. If you throw it out the window loaded, it's not going to discharge. Very safe weapon. To disassemble this gun, it freaks people out. You got to pull the trigger, point in a safe direction. I usually angle it toward the floor, and release the slide. Slide comes off. That's the frame. It's made of polymer. It's got steel rails in it. This is the recoil spring. Barrel, slide. It's easier to demonstrate here. Muzzle, chamber on a semi-automatic firearm. Same for semi-automatic rifle, semi-automatic shotgun. Any magazine-fed weapon. It could be a bolt-action rifle, also is fed from a magazine. Have a chamber in. The chamber is attached to the barrel. In a revolver, it's different. But we're going to the main actions. This is basically just for novice. I don't know if it'll show up on the camera. I'll have to see in there. But you can see the helical spiral cut grooves. That's called rifling. And that's basically it for the semi-automatic pistol. Very simple gun. Glock is about 26 parts in the whole gun. Second type of firearm is a revolver. This is a Smith & Wesson Model 15. 38 Special is the cartridge. This particular firearm that has a cylinder. The chambers are in this cylinder, not in the barrel like in the semi-automatic firearm. This particular gun has 6 chambers in the cylinder. The cartridges go into the cylinder. The cylinder is locked into the frame, and when you squeeze the trigger, the mechanism will advance the cylinder to align the chamber with the barrel before the hammer drops. Same system. The firing pin strikes the primer, high pressure gas is generated, projectile moves down a barrel. This is a snubby, what's called a snub nose. It's a short barrel, 2-inch barrel. It does have adjustable sights though, it's a Model 15. It's a little bit higher end than a typical belly gun. This is also a single action, double action revolver. It means you can cock this firearm and fire it with a lighter trigger pull, single action this is called, or pull the trigger with a heavier pull and cycle the gun. It has most all revolvers have some type of lever on the left side of the gun. The world is made for right-handers, and so you can open the cylinder. Smith, the release pushes forward. Trigger, muzzle. It doesn't have a chamber. A revolver it has, the barrel. This breech end of the barrel is called a forcing cone. That's where when the projectile leaps out of the cylinder, it crosses this little tiny gap, goes down the barrel. Some propellant gases will actually vent here. So if you're holding your hand right over where the forcing cone is, you burn or injure yourself. You don't want to do that. And that's basically the component: muzzle, breech, trigger. Right? So don't walk around your finger on the trigger. This is just basic safety for a novice. And revolvers are very simple. A semi-automatic like a Glock or one of the modern polymer frame striker-fired pistols. They're simple also. They require a little more practice and learning. The components of the cartridge, what goes on inside the explosion, is you have a brass cartridge case. I'm using this 45 Colt as a example, and this is a rimmed cartridge, which most revolver cartridges are. Obviously, this is 38 Special, is much smaller diameter. This is 45 caliber. This has a rim, whereas something like this is a inert 223 round. There's no primer, no propellant in this cartridge. It's a dummy. This is a rimless case. The head of the cartridge is the same diameter as the body, and that's the difference between them. But what happens is when the pressure starts building, the brass expands and seals the chamber to prevent gases from coming back at you. This is one of the genius of this invention in the mid-19th century. Brass is springy, so when the pressure drops, it contracts. Is able to be extracted out of a semi-automatic firearm or a revolver. To get the cases out of a revolver, I don't have any 38 Special here, but you have an ejector rod. It pulls the cases out. And in some future video, when I'm shooting a revolver, I'll demonstrate this. Like I said, for the novice, these are people who never picked up a firearm. These are just certain terms you need to know. Not everybody knows anything from watching TV or whatever. There's a lot of misinformation on the movies and TV with firearms. There's a lot of confusion. Well, before I do that, as an example of another type of action. This is a rifle, but this would be a bolt action. It's a manual turn bolt. It's fed from a magazine, internal magazine. This is a mini Mauser, Zastava. It's an actually 7.62 by 39. It's a fun little gun to shoot. But the cartridges are loaded into this internal magazine, and when you cycle the bolt goes back and forth and turns like a door lock. It'll chamber a cartridge and lock. When you fire the rifle, when you pick the bolt handle up, it cocks the internal striker mechanism, extracts and ejects the spent cartridge, and you're ready to go again. That's one action. You have semi-automatic rifles that operate roughly like the handgun that was demonstrated, the Glock. They're not blowback, they use other mechanisms. A Heckler & Koch type G3 rifle is a delayed roll lockback. Blowback, that's a little getting into the weeds. Most of your rifles are semi-automatic or gas operated. They have a port drilled in a barrel, and they tap some of the gas off to operate the action of the weapon. Except rimfires. This is a 22 caliber Marlin semi-automatic rifle magazine. Obviously, the chamber's empty. This is straight blowback. The cartridge acts directly on the mass of the bolt, and when you fire it, by the time the bullet exits the muzzle and the chamber pressure is dropped, it's already starting to extract and release. It's safe for the action to open. That's the whole thing with the locking mechanism. You don't want high pressure gas blowing back in your face or blowing the gun up. So it has to stay locked until the bullet exits the barrel and the pressure drops. The four components of a cartridge, I don't know if this can be seen. We have the case, powder case. Let's see, I'll use this 300 Weatherby Magnum. The primer's been punched out of it, so it's already been resized, ready to be reloaded. But that hole is where the primer goes. The primer is this little tiny thing. I don't know if it show up on camera. It goes in the base of the cartridge. It contains a lead stiphenite. It's a shock-sensitive explosive. When struck by the firing pin, it initiates the powder charge. This is some smokeless propellant. I don't know if it shows up there. That's actually Accurate Arms 2700. It's a spherical propellant that's going into the weeds with the reloading. We'll do that in the future. And the last thing is obviously the projectile. This is a 30 caliber projectile. 308 is the bore diameter. Now I'll go into explaining that real briefly. This is a hunting bull. Is a Sierra 165 grain Game King. So now you hear all these strange terms, grains and caliber. What are we really talking about? Well, the caliber is the internal bore dimension in fractions of an inch, or expressed in fractions of an inch or millimeters, usually thousandths of an inch or hundredths of an inch. For instance, 50 caliber is half an inch. It's 50 100ths of an inch, or 500 1,000ths of an inch. I believe that's what they named the 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum. It's the same tendency. This is actually not a 40 Smith & Wesson barrel. It's a 357 SIG barrel. It's in my Glock. All you need to do to convert a 40 Smith is a barrel to 357 SIG. But the bore diameter on this, because I'm going to measure it, it's going to come out to 355 thousandths of an inch. It's basically 9 millimeter. And it sounds familiar, 357 thousandths. The bore diameter of this, the projectile fires, is basically almost the same diameter as this 38 Special, which is, the projectile is actually 357 thousandths of an inch. Its big brother, which is one-way interchangeable, the 38 Special can go into a 357 Magnum pistol, revolver. They fire the same projectile, 357 thousandths of an inch. So a 38 Special, when you name it, it's really a 35.5 caliber, a 36 caliber. And that originated in the 19th century, going way back with the cap and ball revolvers. I believe it was a 1851 Navy. 5 round balls, they were 36 caliber. First successful revolvers. So caliber can be restrained. Millimeters can express the diameter of a bullet in a millimeter. For instance, the 223 Remington, the projectile is the same for 5.56 NATO. Well, the metric designation was 5.56 millimeters diameter. And a second thing in a metric designation gives you a little bit more information, 45 millimeters, 5.45 by 45. 5.56 by 45, excuse me, that's a Russian round. The case is 45 millimeters long. So for instance, it gives you an idea that there's a larger case would hold a larger powder charge and would be more powerful. I'm going to illustrate that with 4 30 caliber rifle cartridges. They all can fire basically this 165 grain or if you hand load it, Sierra Game King hunting bullet, 30 caliber, 308 diameter. You take the dial calipers. I don't know if it'll show up on camera. It's 308 thousandths of an inch. The diameter. And it's got a neat little boat tail on the back, streamlined. It calls it a boat tail projectile. Jacketed, soft point, boat tail, BT. This is 300 blackout. Obviously, you can fire 220 grain bullets out of a 300 blackout. This is only 165 grain, but 30 caliber. If I had a metric designation, it's 7.62 millimeter. That's the diameter projectile. And the case would be 35 millimeters in length. The ubiquitous, all over the world anyway, 7.62 by 39. The case is 39 millimeters long. It is slightly longer than the blackout. So the information you get from that is it's a slightly larger powder case. It's also larger in diameter, so it does, and they usually measure cartridge cases, how much water they hold. The next is our old friend here, the 308 Winchester, which is also called 7.62 NATO, which is also 7.62 by 51 is the metric designation. So 51 millimeters is about 2 inches in length. So you got the three. I don't know if they'll all show up here. Well, I'll put them on my hand. My head there. The 308. So you get the 300 blackout, 7.62 by 39, and the 308. All right. When I was in grade school, America tried to switch the U.S. over to metric system. They taught it to us in school, and I remember it to this day, but it wasn't successful. People weren't having it. The last 30 caliber I have here is a 300 Weatherby Magnum. It's a large, it's a hunting cartridge, very powerful. And if I were to make this a metric designation, it's 7.62 by 72 millimeters. But the case is much, much wider than a 300 blackout, so it holds much more propellant. So when you hear these terms bandied about caliber, 30 caliber, everything's a 30 caliber. I have 4 30 caliber cartridges here, but there's a wide spread in their actual power. I have a 223 here, which is always bandied about as some type of super powerful round. It was originally derived off a target round and a varmint cartridge for shooting groundhogs. But you can see it in comparison just to the case of the 300 Weatherby. It's really turned an intermediate power cartridge. Let's see. 9 millimeter. 380 ACP is also known as 9 millimeter Kurtz or short, or its metric designation 9 by 17. The ubiquitous 9 millimeter that just about all the handguns in America today are chambered in is 9 millimeter Luger. It's been called 9 millimeter Parabellum. The metric designation is 9 by 19 millimeters. The case is 19 millimeters long. 380 case is only 17 millimeters long. They both fire the same 3.355, 355 thousandths of an inch projectile, 35.5 caliber, if you will. Another cartridge that's used to be popular in the shooting games is 38 Super. I don't have the millimeter designation offhand, but it's more powerful than a 9 millimeter, and it fires the same projectile. 44 Magnum is really a 43 Magnum. The projectiles are 429 thousandths of an inch. A lot of naming conventions that archaic and screwy. They don't follow a logical reason. Whoever invented the cartridge, they named it, and sometimes it's descriptive, sometimes it's not, like I've just pointed out. But basically, that's a basic overview of the simplest terms for a novice of just acquiring a firearm or just getting a firearm. This is what you would call field stripping this particular pistol, because I'm not doing a video on this particular pistol. I'm not going to go into, but this is all you really need to do to break it down and clean it. There we go. See in there that the striker is internal. It actually comes apart real simple, but I'm not going to do that right now. Put the gun back here, the barrel back in the slide. Spring back in the barrel. Slide back on the gun. There we go. And that's all about I'm going to discuss on this particular video. Like I said, I'm new to this. I'm kind of clunky. Hopefully they get a little more fluid as I go. But just imparting some basic knowledge to people who've never really handled firearms. Because people get into all kind of heated discussions over this or that, controversy. But like I said, they're just tools. And briefly about reloading, I'll probably go into that at some point. But this is 50 or 60% of the cartridge case. So if you can save this and recycle it and reload it, you save a lot of money. A box of these, 20 round box of 300 Weatherby Magnum premium bullets is probably running about $85 a box now. $5 a shot, some of it. It's insane. And you can reload about 100 of these with a pound of powder, which that's gone up in price too. I'm talking about $50. It used to be $30, but there is a considerable savings. Plus, you could form custom loads for your particular rifle or firearm, accurate. Every firearm is like an individual, like a person, and you got to tinker. But that's a discussion for some time in the future. I hope that informed some of you with the very, very basics. I'll try and build on that in some type of logical fashion. I'm sure I'll screw up, but that's all I got for now. Have a good night.